Okay.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I have to say, I often say these kind of things, but I have to say, I am really excited to see what Andy Evansen produces tonight. If you if you looked it up and looked into some of his work, it's just terrific work from my perspective because he does lots of things that I do. He does lots of things outside landscapes and a lot of plein air work. He began as a medical illustrator. I thought that was kind of interesting 30 years ago because that's something that I considered. And then I said, no, 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 it's much too tight for me. But I've gotten away from that. Andy has thankfully too. I shouldn't say thankfully, but it's just some wonderful, wonderful work. He began painting from photographs, which a lot of people do, and gradually he evolved, not totally, but evolved into plein air work. And you will see from the work that he does, and if you look at his website, just wonderful, wonderful, wonderful painting. So, with that having said, Andy, I think it's your turn. They'll spotlight you.
That's really nice, Mike. Thank you. I'm
You're
happy to be
welcome.
here. Yeah, welcome everyone. Thanks for spending your evening with me. As Mike said, I started off as a medical illustrator many years ago, basically right after school, and became a freelance medical illustrator for probably 20 years plus. And never thought I would get into watercolor as a career. My medical illustrations were all starting to be created on the computer. So I had all my painting supplies from art school and everything. So I just started watercolor painting for the hell of it, basically. And then after a few years, decided to join the local Minnesota Watercolor Society and enter their exhibitions and things. And won a couple awards. And then if you get an award, they ask you to do a demonstration for a meeting, and then they get asked to teach a workshop, and then it just kind of snowballed from there. And so I'm very lucky that it just kind of allowed my career to just kind of grow gradually. I wasn't in a rush to make it as a watercolor artist or anything. I had a lot of growing to do. I still do. We all do. But yeah, it worked out pretty perfectly to the point where I was so busy, probably 8 or 9 years ago, that I just stopped doing medical illustration altogether just to focus on this career. I was trying to juggle, two careers probably for too long. I should have stopped a few years before I did. I was burning the candle at both ends. But yeah, it just, like I said, it worked out nicely now that I just get to paint and travel and teach workshops and do what I love. So I hope I can say the same for many of you at some point. If you're not already doing that, it's a really nice way to spend your life and make a career. So what I'm going to do is switch to my all view here, my painting table. You can see me and my palette and the demonstration here. I'll zoom in just a bit for you. This is going to be for the value study. I'll probably just do the middle value connected shape here for you on my value study. But what I do is I like to plan my paintings out with just a small 9 by 12 value study before I dive into the color painting. Just because I was a medical illustrator and focusing so much on detail, I also had a really difficult time loosening up. Our brains want to go and see all the little details right away. So I came up with this mostly as a way to help my students kind of understand my thought process going into my paintings. But I found out very quickly how much it helps me as well. And I still do value studies quite often in the studio. Not so much plein air. Sometimes if I have time, I'll just do that quick middle value connected shape to try and simplify things in my mind's eye. But watercolor is all about having a good, clear idea of what you want to accomplish and practicing, separating out that initial big shape. And your value study is really important. So again, I'll just kind of demonstrate that quickly first, how I find that big connected shape, and then I'll dive into the color painting. So I forgot to ask you, is there a point where you usually kind of have a little break or something for everyone?
There is a point, but you don't have to take it if you're in the middle of stuff. Yeah,
Yeah, I think.
it's we started at 7 o'clock tonight, but normally if we have a meeting in person, we stop about 8:30 for 20 minutes or so.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, there'll be a point where I'm probably going to want to have something dry a little bit, and that might be a good stopping point for a break or whatever. We'll see. I might be
Do
able
you
to.
use a hair dryer?
I'm sorry.
Do you use a hair dryer?
At times, mostly just in these instances. If I'm just painting for me, I never use a hair dryer. But I mean, for these demos, sometimes time is of the essence. You have to
Sure.
speed up the painting process. So yeah, but otherwise, yeah, I don't. I don't like them. Okay, so I'm going to mix a large puddle of middle value Payne's Gray. And there's no real reason why I use Payne's Gray. People always ask me, can I use, lamp black or sepia or something? Yeah, it's fine. You just want to use a pigment where you can get your darks on, dark enough after the fact. So basically, what I do on my value studies here is I try and find this kind of a shape first from the landscape, where I'm just kind of separating out light from everything else. And that everything else, I try as hard as I can, if at all possible, to connect it into one large shape. And what that does is it just kind of establishes my composition, and it allows for all these beautiful kind of lost edges that are where the magic of watercolor really kind of shines when the pigment and water is just kind of merging and doing its own thing in between shapes. And I just think too often, when we're looking at a scene, our brains want to identify all these individual objects and shapes to the point where then we just paint the tree and stop, and paint the barn and stop, and paint the hill and stop. And it starts to look like a coloring book. Everything stays in the lines. It just doesn't flow. And watercolor is just such a beautiful medium if you let Mother Nature take its course in some passages. I'm not saying the whole thing has to be loosey-goosey or anything, but if you want to loosen up just a little bit and help your compositions, I think it's kind of nice to find that first big connected shape. So that's always my goal on my value study, primarily, first and foremost, is to kind of squint down at the reference, either the scene in front of me or the reference photograph, and start to identify all the light areas. And it's all relative, obviously, sometimes the tone, it just depends on the scene where your mids and darks are and everything. But in general, your sky is part of the light wash on a landscape, not always. You have stormy skies or, of course, nocturnes and things. But in most landscapes, the sky is going to be part of your light wash. So definitely in this one, it is. And when I'm squinting down, then I'm seeing all this stuff in the background, the skyscrapers, behind Central Park, and then some of the trees and things connecting to it. That's all middle value. This little area is light, a lot of it is, but it's got some middle value connections that are going to allow me to go from the background straight down into the foreground throughout here. Okay. So some of these areas are light. This little area up here is light, maybe a few little highlights on figures here and there. This little corner is in sunlight. This is mostly in sunlight. And then, of course, most of the ground plane, with the exception of some shadows coming across. And then the tricky part is the figures. Okay. We've got a lot of figures wearing dark clothing, some figures wearing light clothing, but the light on their shoulders, the sunlight's kind of coming from this direction. So the light on this side, and then the shadow side of her jacket, so for instance, is going to connect into that middle value shape too. So, and yes, she's wearing a white shirt, but it's not all white. She's got white back here, and then this is middle value. That's going to connect into the shadow area as well. Okay, so I'm going to just leave some random little light areas back here where the figures are. It's amazing what you can get away with once you establish, two or three of these figures a little bit more accurately walking around. Then they get back here and they're just literally little dashes of paint and highlights and heads and things, and the viewer is just going to see a crowd. So that's the goal, is to not get too fussy with it. There's just too much going on. I don't have any interest in, spending a week on this thing and reproducing that photograph so I can frame that. I want it to look like a painting, okay? So I need to find out where to simplify some of these shapes. So once I've got my big middle value Payne's Gray puddle mixed, the next step is trying to decide where I want to start that big shape. And I always start at the side of my paper somewhere, top to bottom, left to right, whatever it might be, whatever just seems appropriate for a larger shape. In this instance, I think because I'm right-handed, I usually like to start on the left side. So I'm just going to start over here and work my way across. I'll try and kind of point on the reference photograph so you can follow along a little bit of what I'm doing here. Um, all right. So again, most of this stuff back here is going to be middle value up into the tree tops and skyscrapers and things. Okay, I'm going to leave some little gaps and lights behind. And now into this this pillar in the side of the stairwell and things here, that's going to have a shadow side as well. And the little bowl on the top of it is also going to have a shadow. It's got some trees behind it and another skyscraper or two maybe. There's a little highlight on the side of it here that I'm going to try and paint around. And then of course the light side on the top of it. Okay, I want to come down here and connect this down. This is just going to be a small connection, so I'm going to stop there and get back up to the bigger, more important shapes here soon. This is the top of that railing that's in shadow. That's also going to be mostly middle value there. A couple of other little smaller peripheral shapes again, but nothing that's that important. Okay, back up into this area. I'm going to paint around that little pedestal here. That tree is darker. I'm not even gonna worry about that tree right now. I'm just gonna paint right through it. Again, a couple more skyscrapers and things in the background here. Just try and make it look a little bit like a city. There's a little street lamp there or something. Use that tree line around to frame in that rest of that little pedestal here. This one also has a shadow coming down. That's not connected, but that's all right. Okay, and this is going to come down. A couple other lighter shapes. Maybe there's a figure up at the top of the stairs catching some of that sunlight. This is going to go right into the stairs themselves. Those are also darker and middle value. Another shadow side of this pillar here. Try and paint around that little figure light. Simplify, simplify all the time. I'm trying to find areas where I can decide to leave some detail out. And it does help to kind of squint down at this scene while I'm painting it quite a bit, actually. Okay, here's that little other bowl up here. Shadow side of this. Coming down again, reload my brush again. Come back down here. I want to get back to these stairs before I lose that bead. We can practice making them look like stairs by just breaking up the edge a little bit over here. Paint around that light shape there. The top of the railing again is in light, so I can stop right about there. I'm going to continue over here for just a second now, kind of jumping back and forth to make sure I don't lose that little leading edge, that bead shape. This shadow coming down, and that's going to connect down into the area with all the people here. We go. Back over here real quickly before I come back into that area. Get that shadow in. There's another figure there with a little bit of light on her shoulder. Kind of being framed in and some light on the back of her jeans. This figure, the stairs kind of frame out here. This figure's got a little light on his face and his hands and his shorts. And then his leg is going to come back and kind of connect like so. She's got a little cast shadow there. Okay, back over to here again. All of this is in shadow. All of this side over here. And I can practice just trying to indicate some of the little breaks and architectural things in this railing here too. Just trying to keep it simple. And we've got a few figures standing up there, looking out. And they're usually darker. And then the background trees up here. These are also going to be a little bit darker. Middle value, I should say. Okay, all that coming down. All right, back down here again. Like I said, this is all middle value and dark. And that big anchoring shape is going to help to spotlight all the little people down below here. So once I get down here, I'm just going to start leaving some little random heads, highlights on heads and things. This is the the tall guy here wearing the dark jacket. He's got a little bit of light on his side of his face there. And this gal that he's walking with has some light on her blonde hair, but that side of her coat is in middle value. And that's going to help frame in her shoulder. Now I'm back over to this little area with some guys hanging out. Again, highlights on their heads and things, a few of them. And their clothing, for the most part, is a little bit darker. Not all of it, but some jeans, whatever, just randomly leaving a few lights. Like I said, that's just going to indicate to the viewer that there's some more people back there. Okay, her legs striding forward. That jean is in shadow. That leg striding forward, her foot, and she's going to be casting a little bit of a shadow. Again, this guy is mostly dark and middle value. Same thing. And then that's going to connect right back here into some more figures. There's just no way I would have time to do all of them or the desire, to be honest, to paint all those figures. I'm not, I've done enough detail work to last me a lifetime. So trying as best as I can to make it look like a painting. Like I said, I don't want this to be, that's already dried, but that's all right. Um, and back into more figures here again. A couple other little highlights, trying to make sure I'm paying attention to the level of where the heads are so that they're all kind of lining up. Okay, now I've got these couple of gals here. Same thing. Her sleeve, the front of her shirt is there. There's a little bit of a darker figure here. Some shadows. This is going to be one heck of an attempt to simplify one, especially when it comes to the color. I mean, it's hard enough just in middle value here, but there's just absolutely no way I could even hope to do something like this without taking the time to simplify all this chaos a bit ahead of time and just give myself an idea of how I want to tackle this. Okay, this figure here is all darker, except for the light on her side of her cap and her hands holding her omnipresent cell phone and down into her jacket and her legs. And then we've got this, the stairs coming across here as well. And then I think a couple of shadows coming in off of stage right, and maybe take some artistic license and make that shadow just a little bigger so it helps to anchor the scene down a little bit. And she's also got a bit of a shadow coming out here. Okay, that's pretty descriptive. The last thing I'm need all the big dark tree trunks and things in the background I didn't worry about just yet. I can practice doing a little bit of the dry brush on the tops of these kind of wintry spring trees with no foliage on them. Anything you can do to practice and give yourself some confidence going into your final painting um, is part of the reason why I like to do these value studies, working through some potential pitfalls and issues. But okay, so I've got all my middle value in there now. So this is going to be very, very helpful in my first two big anchoring washes, the light wash and the big middle value shape for my color painting. All these light areas that I left on my value study, the white paper is going to be, I'm going to wet my paper on the color version, and I need to get blue sky up here. I need to get this gold, kind of green gold color in the stonework here, this pale violety pink in the ground plane here, some of the light colors in the figures and their clothing. So everything is just going to be, soft and fuzzy in that first light wash. And then once that's dried a bit, I'll come in and try and just copy this shape on my color one so that I have that. This is my map. Okay. This is way too much to paint. I wouldn't even know where to begin on something like that. This I can paint. Okay. That one big shape. So I'm trying to give myself a real clear idea of how to keep this nice and simple. It'll be amazing what all the dark details will do to pop everything out at the end of this, but I'm not ready for that yet. So that's why I don't finish my value studies. By the way, this is the most difficult stage of the painting is when you're starting to define your objects and your brain wants to separate them out and paint them as a collection of 12 individual shapes, not just one shape. So while I have this on my value study, I'm going to go to my color painting and make sure that that map is there and then I'll come back and put this in. And that's a big difference, okay? The darks. But if I finish my value study with all my darks and then go to my color painting, I lose sight of that big connected shape at times. It's hard to remember because now the details are back in there in front of me. So just kind of trusting the process, knowing that the darks will refine and define and make a big difference later on in the painting, but it's just not time for it just yet. Okay, well, there is my middle value, my value study. Excuse me for a second. I want to take a photo of that for posterity. Okay. All righty. So I've got
Andy, I have a
two.
question.
Sure.
It has nothing to do with your painting. It has to do with the subject. You
Okay.
said that's in Central Park
Yes. It's
in New York City?
right by the Bethesda fountain.
Bethesda Fountain. Yeah, I painted there. I thought that's what it was.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that is a busy place to paint. It's always full of people. It's always chaotic.
Yes. People get
Uh,
engaged there.
yeah, yeah, I know,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. Got a really neat painting from my friend Joe Paquette, famous oil painter here in Minnesota too. Great, great oil painter. And I was in a workshop with him. That was my first time I was ever in Central Park. And so every day we would go into the park to have class. And then one day after class, we were all, I mean, at the end in the afternoon, we were all in this area by Bethesda Fountain. And close to the end of class, some people were coming by like security and shooing everybody off of the plaza and making us all pack our gear up and leave and stuff and whatever. And Joe, being Joe, he just stayed there and painted. And I don't know if they thought he was part of the crew or what, but it turns out they were going to film that scene from the producers where Nathan Lane and Matthew Broderick are getting into the pool and stuff. So they had all these lights set up and the filming crew and everything, big lights and then sure enough, Nathan Lane and Matthew Broderick walked about 6 feet away from me at one point. He walked right past me and but yeah, we just sat there, and then eventually they did. Finally, somebody on the crew kicked Joe out, but he managed to get this really cool painting of that scene done, and I have that painting in my house now. It's a good memory. Hmm. Okay, so I've got, like I said, two important references here: the reference photograph, obviously, and the value study. So when I just kind of lightly blocked in. I'm working on Saunders 140-pound rough, by the way. That's my preferred paper. And I don't, unless I'm working on a full sheet, I don't stretch it or staple it down. I just work on a piece of paper. My table, by the way, is barely sloped, maybe 5 degrees. It's almost flat. It's just sloped enough so I get a little better viewpoint of the painting image. But I don't like everything running down to the bottom of my painting, so I usually just try and slope it just a little bit. Okay, so everything is going to fit on the page with that light sketch first. So now I'm going to come in and kind of darken up my drawing a little bit here. And when I do this, I try and do a bit of a contour drawing so that I'm already kind of thinking about connections. It's real easy to see the separations. That's what our brains want to see. It's a lot more difficult to find the connections between all of these shapes. So if I can already, at the drawing stage, start to think, how does this shape connect to that shape, to that shape, to that shape? I'm already working on getting my in the right frame of mind for trying to paint this as a nice big simple shape. Okay, here's the top of that thing, that other little pillar on the side of the stairwell here, my steps. I'm going down a little bit, another pillar here, light side, shadow side of it. And also by doing a kind of a contour drawing, it helps me to avoid too much detail. Okay, I'm sticking to literally the contour, or the silhouette of these shapes, the outlines. I don't need more than that. I can paint all the little stuff with my brush. Okay, the more I put on my paper, pencil marks, every one of those pencil marks becomes one of the lines in a coloring book that you want to stop and fill in and paint around. So if I don't have so many lines on my paper, I can paint much more freely. Just move my brush around the paper. Put a little bowl up here. I don't like how that tree was right behind it, so I just moved it over to the left just a little bit here. Most of this tree I'll just paint with a brush. I'm just going to try and get in a couple of the main trunks and branches here, but again, I don't need to fill in a pre-drawn pencil mark for any of these things. It'll be fine without that. A couple of the big ones. All right, I've got another couple of figures here. And this shape and a couple of gals here looking down on the crowd with amusement. And then I need to know where these archways are going to be. And so in this little area, I can put those in pretty darkly because I don't want to sketch them in lightly. I'm going to be going over this with a pretty dark middle value wash. And I want to know where those shapes are going to be later. So I mean, if it's going to be that dark and paint later, I don't worry about the pencils showing through or anything. I just go ahead and go that dark with my pencil mark right away to make sure it's still going to be there. Okay, down here to my people now. And again, I'm gonna maybe take a little bit of time on a couple of the more prominent people that are stepping out of the crowd here a bit maybe. And then in the background, I'll just lightly kind of indicate heads and things so I know where they're going to be. But I guarantee you, even then, if I sketch some of them in when it comes to painting them, I'll probably change about half of what I draw and just put in little dark colors and shapes where I see them. And her jeans here and her feet, okay. And more kids and things back here. Old gaggle kids. Dirty, rotten teenagers. There we go. All right. A white hat is kind of important. I like that. Okay. More little people back here and there. Just every once in a while, if I see somebody's shirt or form stand out a bit, I'll kind of focus on that. But they're all kind of merging together into this big grouping, so I'm not going to worry too much about that. All right, here's these two gals in the front now. Get their forms in. They're down just a little bit lower because they're standing down off of the steps, that platform. Otherwise, their heads would be up a little bit at the same level as everybody else, but yeah, they're down a little ways. She's there. Another one here. Her head's turned to the side for some reason. Probably a hot guy walking over there or something. All right. And her hair, sleeve, and the legs. Okay, and I want to very lightly just kind of put in a pencil mark for that sweeping step coming across here. Just so I know about what it's going to be. All right, this figure looking down into her phone with her cool, I like the color, that mustard color of her knit cap there. And again, I just kind of want to know where the lights are on her hands holding her cell phone. She's a bit more of a prominent figure there. Guy, taller guy back here. And all right. And the railing going up like so. And coming down and connecting into this last pillar. Sorry, I know this is a lot of drawing, but I wanted you to be able, I was going to have it pre-drawn, but it's kind of good to see me simplify some of this stuff too. So I figured I'd help you fall asleep a little early tonight and watch me draw. Okay, there. All right, this kid walking, his backpack, striding forward here. Okay. All the big important shapes are in now. Most of the rest of this stuff I can just paint with my brush. I don't even have to draw the shapes of the skyscrapers. I didn't on here. I'll just paint them, and wherever they end up, that's where they are. So now I'm going to take a kneaded eraser and kind of take off some of those light sketchy lines that I had on initially, and some of this extra graphite because I'm going to wet my paper and I don't want to be smearing graphite all over the place. So I'm just going to take a kneaded eraser and go over it lightly and get rid of some of that off of my paper here. I can still see my darkened up contour drawing very very well. Important shapes are still going to be there. I went fairly dark where I needed to, so even with going over this with an eraser, I'll be able to see that stuff. All righty, here we go. So there's my drawing. Just, all the important shapes. That's more drawing that I do on probably 90% of my paintings, just because of all the people and the architecture and the perspective and all that of the steps and all. So yeah, most of the time it doesn't take nearly that long to sketch my scenes out. Okay, so I'm gonna wet the back of my paper first, and then I'll flip it over and wet the front of the paper. I want just that little bit of extra time to make sure I'm not getting any hard edges in that first light wash. And again, my first light wash is just gonna be getting rid of the white paper from my value study. Okay, I don't want all those areas that I left white paper here are gonna need to be covered up. Trying to figure out how I can get almost everything on here so you can see it all. That might be the best way with this odd vertical format. Okay. All righty. So I'm going to take a natural sponge here. It's soaking wet. Soak all the back of that piece of paper. Just because I don't, tape my paper down or anything, this will help it from curling up on me as well. Squeeze it out and go over it again. Now I'm actually taking a little bit of that water back off. I don't want it sopping wet. That's one of the reasons why I like to use a sponge. To use it just a big, like a squirrel mop brush. You get it really wet and slop it on there, and sometimes you end up with too much water on your paper. Again, I just want it to be damp, but you can see it's already, I've wet the back, so it's curling on me. So when I wet the front, it'll lie down nice and flat. So now when I wet the front, I just want to avoid any white areas. There's not a lot. There's a couple of white ball caps and maybe a little bit of the back of her shirt or something that I'll leave behind, but pretty much everything else has some kind of a tone on it. I don't have to worry too much about avoiding many areas here. When I get down here to the top of them, I'll try and, like I said, just leave a couple of lighter shapes for ball caps and things, but I can always come back and put a little gouache in a couple areas too. I have no qualms about using gouache if it calls for it. Try to avoid it if I can, but not a big deal. Sometimes it's required. I'd much rather come in with a couple little touches of gouache than go through it with masking fluid first. I have an aversion to masking fluid. All right. Just getting it nice and wet here. Make sure it's got a good surface, ready to take that first light wash. I'm gonna squeeze it out again one more time and kind of go over it just to make sure I don't have too much water on. I mean, by wetting the front and the back, this will stay damp plenty long for me to get my first light wash on here. I'm not going to be getting hard edges. If I do, I'm not working fast enough. And I'm not worried about detail in that first light wash either. I'm just covering it, throwing color in there, so it'll be just fine. Okay. Everything is damp. I want to start with a clean palette here. Get some of this off. All right. So I'll just go ahead and I want to indicate a little bit of some clouds up in that blue sky first. So I'll just go ahead and kind of start with the sky. Um, I'm going to put a little, maybe some neutral tint and lavender up there to indicate the clouds themselves very lightly. just to break up that blue sky a little bit is all. Okay, now I'll come in with the blue. I'm going to mix some cerulean and cobalt together for that sky. And I will start up at the top here. And I'll try and paint around, leave it maybe a little bit of some slightly white paper for those clouds too, but they're not really white. They have that tone on them. So again, and a lot of this is going to get obviously covered up when I put in those all the trees and the dry brushing and stuff that I'm going to be doing up there. So it's not that big a deal. I'm not worried about how it turns out or looks at this stage. So much of it is going to disappear anyways. But I do want some blue sky showing through anywhere where I'm going to leave gaps in those trees for the most part. Okay, so that area is all filled in on my value study, this white area. Now I'm down to the gold and stuff of the architecture. There's a little bit of that kind of violety blue here on the side of this. I may as well just kind of drop that in there as well and up here. Okay. All right, so I'm going to switch to a little smaller brush now. Get this off my palette as well. And now I'm going to mix a variety of those warm colors, some yellow ochre, some quin gold, a little burnt sienna, maybe a little cerulean blue. Like I said, it's kind of got this greenish gold tint to it in spots. Alrighty. So I'm just going to continue down, basically down into this area here. And it can fuzz into the background a bit too. It's fine. I'm not trying to stain the lines, like I said before at this point. I'm just trying to get rid of the white of the paper. Get that nice glow on here. Can come down into the steps even. I'm gonna tone it down just a little bit with some neutral tint and cerulean blue in a couple of spots. This is gonna dry a lot lighter than what I'm putting it on here, by the way. Okay, I know it probably looks way too dark right now, but I'm compensating for the fact that once this is all dry in, 15, 20 minutes or whatever it takes, I'm gonna try and let it sit and air dry for just a couple minutes here, but once I hit it with a blow dry and dries, it's going to fade like at least one value, probably two values lighter than that in the end. So I always tell my students, if it looks right when you put it on, it's wrong. It's going to lighten up quite a bit. Okay, get that light up there also and on the edge of here.
Mm.
Again, that can just fuzz out into this background area. It doesn't matter. That's going to get covered up with more trees and things later. Okay, so that's filled in. That's filled in. This little area is filled in, starting down here. Now work my way down. Try not to lose sight of my value study if at all possible. Go back and forth between the reference photograph and the value study and just remind myself, what am I doing right at this stage? I'm not painting things. I'm just getting rid of the white paper. I'm gonna go a little bit brighter and gold, a little bit more gold down here. Warm it up slightly.
Mm.
On that shape there. And I can go into this area. And okay, now I'm coming down to my figures here. So this gal has some blonde hair that can come right down into her. She also has blonde hair. That's coming into her. That guy's ball cap, I tried to leave a little white, so I can leave that behind. I want to get that kind of a mustardy color on her cap here. A little bit more yellow. bit brighter. Okay. And she also has kind of this warm mustard colored jacket on. That fuzz back. Okay, I'm getting close to where I want to start warming things up with like some pinks and everything for that ground surface. The tile down there is kind of this pink color, so I'm going to put some permanent rose into this mess. A lot of times I don't wipe my palette off entirely all the time. If you just use what's on there and try and tint it a little bit and change, unless I'm making a drastic color change, like from blue to gold or something, I have to clean it off. But if it's in the same, warm family or something, I just leave it on there and add into it. Let's see if I can leave a couple of white tennis shoes there. So this is my ground plane. I took this figure out, by the way. I'm just focusing on this one here with the cell phone. I'm gonna come up around this young man's leg a bit. Lost that blue of her blue jeans. I want to try and get that back in a second if I can. That pale color can be in her hands also and in her face, actually. In her face, I want her hair a little brighter also. Just I'll lift some of that off a bit. Too much of that color pouring in. All right. Need a little bit more lavender in there, I think. I'm not worried about all the little um, light lines and things that you're seeing in there. All right, I want to try and leave her white tennis shoe behind also, if possible. Get around these young men's legs. Okay, and now that's all filled into. Now I'm into this middle ground area where I'm gonna just start putting in a few colors of clothing and whatnot. I'm gonna try and finish that area of the archway. I don't want to leave that just white paper for now, even though I'm gonna be covering all that up later. But I want to come in here and just make sure that this isn't white for now. Bring it all the way down, and then I'll start adding color into my figures here. Someone's either snoring or has a sippy cup. I'm assuming snoring. Okay, I'm gonna put a little color into this guy's face and some other little skin tones here and there. Dropping in some of that where the head level is. Some of these figures. Also leaving some room for hats and things. So that's just going to be a few of those light areas. Same thing, I want to come back in and kind of fill in that area above the boy on the left, even though I'm going to be covering it up later. I don't want to leave it white paper, so I'm going to just continue this wash down and around him and connect that area. I do want to try and leave a little highlight on his head if possible, and on his hand coming out the front there, and the leg. Okay, so I've got him in there. All right, now I've got a lot of blue jeans and things like that, and small little dabs of color here and there. She had some blue jeans on. I wanted to leave behind. And there's a blue shirt back here. Another kind of a blue shadow. She has blue jeans on also. And some behind her, these kids. He's wearing a dark shirt, so it doesn't really matter what I put on him. He'll be covered up later anyways. Okay, so I bounced some blue around. Then we've also got some kind of a neutral tint color in some of that area. So I'll put some of that in here, including with his jacket, her shirt. This kid has a little bit of a darker shirt on, backpack or something. Same as this kid with the white ball cap. I don't want to leave too many white highlights, or it gets to look a little too busy. I want those figures, there's not a lot of actual white paper back here. So I'm going to make sure I'm simplifying quite a bit, even though, like I said, a lot of this is going to get covered up with legs and things later anyways, but got a little bit of a lighter color there. And let's get a couple of reds in here too. This kid's basketball shorts are kind of a reddish color. I'm just going to drop that in. There's a pink shirt back here. Maybe another one back in this area somewhere. Bounce that color around a bit. Not a lot. I don't want to make it a rainbow. There's only a couple of red spots. Red attracts a lot of attention, so I don't want to get too carried away with that. But again, just try and frame some. Oh, and there's some brown too. A little bit of like brown leather and stuff. Maybe I'll get just a little bit of that in, and then everything should be pretty much filled in at that point. Everything I need to worry about anyways. That up a little bit higher. A couple spots, too many white things there. All right, some brown leather. A little darker on his face there. And I'll cover up some more of those probably when I do the mids and darks too, so not too big a deal. I just didn't want to leave too much there. Just a couple other little spots up above also. People up here. Shirts and just let them bleed into the background. It was a little too much paint. And some skin tone again. Let that come through that architecture too. You're gonna see those people in the gaps there. Okay. Now, if I feel like there's just too many lights in places, I'll just come back in and try and kill a few more of those also. Like I said, those whites become very staccato and a little bit distracting. All right, there's enough highlights on there to leave behind. Well, that's most of what I'm gonna have to do on this wash. Again, I'm not really defining anything. I wanted to put a little bit of warm color up here for these little flags and stoplights and things. So that wash is sole purpose is to, like I said, get rid of the white paper from the value study. So this area has my cloudy sky with blue sky in it. These areas have that goldish green color of the stonework and everything in it. Same as this area here. This area has that kind of violety pink of the tile. A lot of the areas here are going to have some white highlights for shirts and caps, and then just some colors for clothing and whatnot left behind as well. And so if everything is in there that I need on this wash, nothing's really defined at all, just killing the white of the paper. Okay, now I need to let this dry just a little bit. I'd like to leave it dry for just a few minutes naturally before I blast it with a hair dryer. So Does anybody have any questions or anything at this?
Yes, why do you do that naturally before a hairdryer? What's the difference?
I just like the way the colors merge on the paper more if you just let it dry naturally. I've noticed that quite a bit in my plein air paintings if it's hot and windy and I can barely get that first wash on the paper before it's dry.
Yeah.
It feels dead when it dries too fast in the heat and the wind. So if I can just give it a few moments to just, like I said, all these, almost everything, when you look at my palette here, there's like 8 different colors on there and they all settle out at different rates. And when it's just left to its own devices to dry naturally. So yeah, I just try to give it a little time to breathe and settle before I blast it with a hair dryer. That's all. It just
Okay,
dents
thank
it.
you.
Yeah. Any other questions about anything I've done up to this point? Great. I explain things like Carl Sagan. I like it. This is how the universe works.
Actually, there's a comment from Steve. He says his comment is Tony Van Hasselt. Draw where it goes, paint what it is.
Draw where it goes. Draw where it goes. Trying to figure out what
Draw
he
where
means.
it goes, paint where what it is.
Hmm.
Hmm.
I'm not sure what I
There's
know what that means actually. Draw where it goes.
we have an intellectual member, Steve Sedair.
Ah. What do you think he means by that, Steve? Can you unmute yourself?
He's having trouble doing stuff like that. But
Oh, you can't be that intellectual. No, I'm just kidding.
no, oh, hey, that's different.
I'm totally
You can
kidding.
be brilliant and haven't got a clue about the computer.
Oh my God, yes. Tell me about it. Yeah, and vice versa. Yeah. Okay. So yep, I'm just gonna I think I'll hit it with a hair dryer now. Most of it. I mean, especially in the sky and everything, those larger areas, that's what I wanted to give time to just, dry a little bit more naturally. So I think at this point I can speed it up a bit. Right. Should be okay, I think. I hope. Well, I was gonna do the back just with. All right. The tone is set. So now, like I said, now is the tricky part. Trying to take all this chaos and information and detail and everything, and really try and stay true to the value study. And oftentimes, I see this is kind of the one big hurdle that my students encounter trying to make that jump from the value study to color. It's amazing how quickly, oftentimes they manage to get that value study concept down, which isn't easy either. Looking through the details and trying to find that big shape, that takes a while. But then, I have these online classes and they post their value study and the color painting, and I'll do little critiques on them and stuff. And I can't tell you, like 90% of the time, I'm showing them the value study and it reads so beautifully and simple and everything. And then their color painting is just overworked to death, and all the detail is right back in there. And it's like they just ignored the value study and tried to copy the photograph again. So it's important to, really try. That's why I don't finish off that value study, with the dark details. And at that point, that just confuses and muddies the waters. Okay, I want to keep that staring in front of me because it's too vital, too important. Okay, so now instead of just having one big, puddle of Payne's gray on my palette, I need to get the colors from that middle value. And again, it's not a particularly colorful scene other than, all the people and stuff. So in that middle value, unfortunately, there's just a lot of neutral tint and, duller grade browns and warms, not even in this, not just in the stonework, but also in the background and stuff. So I don't want to get too carried away with it. It doesn't have to be, colorful everywhere. That is going to help, keep the spotlight on the figures and the activity down here. If this isn't all, too colorful, there's a lot going on up there already. So that's fine. So I'm going to mix probably some, again, ochre, burnt sienna, neutral tint, lavender, some cerulean blue, to kind of dull things down, neutralize things. As I get down here, this seems a little bit more of kind of a warmer dark, maybe more of a violety dark than back here, and the trees and the skyscrapers and things. I'll get some more lavenders and blues in there. Same thing with the sweeping curve of that step and the shadows and things. And then obviously all the little middle value connections in my figures are where I'll try and drop in a bit more color again. So, all right. So I don't even have to really clean my palette. It's a lot of the same um, colors and pigments that I had in that first wash. I'm just going to add to it again. So some yellow ochre, burnt sienna, neutral tint. Get those dull down. Um, Warms. Lavender is a nice color to kind of take the edge off of those the warm stones. And I found it really useful when I was painting in England with all the warm kind of whatever sandstone or whatever the stone buildings and stuff in the Cotswolds and everything in England. You kind of start off, you're looking at it and you're mixing ochre and burnt sienna or raw sienna or whatever to mix, but it's too warm, it's too yellowy. And if I'm trying to darken it with cobalt blue or something, it gets green, it turns to a little bit too green. So lavender is a nice complement, purple and yellow, obviously. So that lavender color is a nice complement to the warms, and it's got a little bit of white in it, so it just kind of helps take the edge off those warm colors pretty nicely, and it makes a nice kind of a shadow color for the stone without it getting too ugly. And I wanted something that was a little more violety on those steps, maybe. Some areas are a little bit darker middle value than others. Okay, I want it to be a little bit more of a kind of a true middle value in the background, but obviously down in here, that contrasty shadow area, I'll go a bit stronger with that middle value when I paint this in so that those dark archways don't jump off the paper too much. It's a little tricky painting from photographs, obviously. The camera, the aperture on the camera, it can't focus in on both the light and the shadow. So a lot of times if it's picking up a lot of nice color in the sunlight and everything, the shadows get too dark and too dull, obviously. So that's another one of the benefits of plein air painting. Your eye can see into those shadow areas and get a much truer kind of a judgment of the color and the value in those areas than the camera is able to capture. Okay, so I want to start basically around that same area I did on the value study and just kind of try and work my way across. But it's nice to get my palette. I can't mix everything I need, obviously, but if I can get my palette kind of looking like this at the start, so I have a good selection of middle value puddles of color that I can just kind of keep cleaning my brush off and grabbing from. Now, like I said, I've got a nice running head start into this wash without having to stop and mix everything I need. I've got some neutral tints, some brown, some ochre, some violet color, some blue, and I can just kind of keep mixing them together as I go. So I can get hopefully get a nice transition of color in that big connected shape. All right. And I'll have two brushes at the ready here. The like a size 14 sable type brush here, and then a size 10 a Scoda Perla synthetic for some smaller detail work. And I'll go back and forth. I don't want to paint this large area with a small synthetic, but I might want to do some dry brushing and stuff on these skyscrapers and some of the smaller little detail things with that. And especially down around the figures, I'll switch to a smaller brush. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get started here. Same thing as on my value study over here on this left edge with some of these trees and things in the background. And I'm already going to try and do some dry brushing on that area, break it up to make them look like kind of that scumbling winterized trees. And it can come right into this area. That's going to be darker anyways later. Get a little bit more violet-y as I come down with this. Might be a building or something back there that's got a little different color on it. That's going to come right into the top of that railing here. Again. Okay, same shape. Now I'm going to go back to that skyscraper area in the background. And I want to kind of frame in this the light side of that little pillar over here. Whoops, a little too dark. I almost always paint with a paper towel in my hand, by the way, if I'm painting, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh gosh, that's too dark. I just wipe off my brush real quick and get some of that pigment off. I'll frame it in with a couple little harder edge shapes to make it look like some buildings in the distance, not just trees. So obviously, you know, a little bit more time and care than what I took on the value study, but I don't want to reinvent the wheel, like I was saying with what I find my students often doing. Just because I'm going to color, don't necessarily want to just go crazy with detail again. At this point of the game, I still want things to be nice, big, loose, suggesting shapes here and there.
Andy, do you ever paint without your glasses?
Not really, no. I mean, I squint, even though I have my glasses on, I'm squinting, but at least now I have them on. So when I need to, you know, kind of see something, I can open my eyes up and it's there. But I know
Okay.
it seems kind of counterintuitive to not worry about details and have my specs on, my cheaters, but just in case, I still find myself needing them from time to time.
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna leave a little highlight up at the top of the stairs for figures, something up there. Keep going that background area. That's going to connect right into here. Pretty soon I want to come in and connect this down to that shadow area. Paint around the top of that. There's a little lighter tree trunk here. I can maybe leave a couple of those branches behind. And again, some buildings. Don't want them to be all the same size and shape. Make one a little bigger, shorter, fatter, whatever it might be. Try and get a little variety into this. Okay, same shape here. I'm up here on this railing now, framing in the shadow side of this little pillar there, that little column. I can come up into here. Now this will be probably a good spot to get back to the big stuff down below here. Just like I was doing there, because that's just a small connection, a little break in the action. So I want to get down to my steps where I'll see in them things a little bit more violet-y kind of tone here. And a little bit darker again as well. Really want to kind of pop that out. And like I said, if I just kind of make my brush strokes to look a little bit more like those, just break it up a little bit to help it look like steps. Not going to paint every one, but of course. Trying to be careful that I don't paint into my railing over here. So now I'm painting with that smaller synthetic brush. I'm trying to be careful with a little bit more detail in this area. And that's going to come right down into the shadow side of this thing. And more steps back here. That's going to continue down here. 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 Those again are just some smaller shapes. I'm not going to worry too much about that just yet. This is going to help frame in the young man walking here. And I'm going to leave a little highlight on the gal standing in the shadow area of that little pillar. Okay, now I want to paint around the front of his face and the front of his body. Leave that little highlight. I can paint into his darker jersey and backpack and stuff. Just leave little highlighted areas behind. Same thing on the front of his leg there. That's going to come right up and help to spotlight the shadow side on her. Okay. Connecting, simplifying whenever I can, even with the people, especially with the people actually. Don't want to get too carried away with them. Want that to be a little bit warmer. That shadow on this pillar here. And just leave the light on her hair. Frame that in. And on the back of her blue jeans a bit as well. Okay, so that's there. And I can come over and little details, architectural details, whatever. Alrighty. Just a couple little shadows on them to connect them down in. All right. So got all this in, those trees in the background, some skyscrapers, this shape. Whoops, I didn't get this coming down. Always helps to go back to that value study and double check things. Make sure that shadow is coming down to connect right down to my steps there. So another little light. Do just a few more smaller architectural details here and there. The side of that. Bit of a thing there and here. Again, I don't want to get too busy with it just yet. You can always come in and fix some of those things later. It's fine. Okay, so now I think I'm gonna get over to this big shape and work my way down and in and around everybody down here. So again, a little bit darker now with that middle value. I don't have to go over it too many times. It's just kind of a warm dark. I'm gonna add some Payne's gray and everything into this, but it just feels quite a bit stronger and darker back here than those shapes in the background. Get that perspective a little bit better there. This one too was a little bit darker. Sometimes I'm gonna add a little bit more blue in it, sometimes a little bit more brown. It's one of, even though it's a dull area back there, I wanna maybe get a little bit of color in it when I can. And just suggest some of that stuff in that railing here and there. Right, that shadow's gonna come creeping across here. I want to soften that edge maybe just a little bit as that shadow comes over here. Just clean my brush off and get that in. But this is gonna help to spotlight the tops of my figures one more time, just like in the value study. So now when I'm getting lower here, I'm gonna try and carve out some heads and things. But also kind of bring that right down into my people at some points too. And not just frame them in the top of them. If it gets a little bit darker as it's coming down in, I can just continue it into that shape. That's the whole point. Okay. Surrounding that guy's face again. Surrounding this woman's hair again, her blonde hair, kind of carving that out from that shape. Okay, now I'm down to these kids. Again, I can carry that down in. I'll change the color on my brush in a moment here. I don't want to do it too soon. And again, the kid with the white ball cap on. I want to frame that in a little bit better here, like so. Okay. So all those people are connected into this now. Again, I want to maybe change the color on my brush and just bring that down in with some blues, some darker blues and neutral tints and stuff for the shadow sides of, especially like I said, the figures that are wearing blue. Leave a few highlights there, but make sure that that shape is continuing down into backpacks and shadow sides of jeans and all that kind of stuff, and shadows on the ground as well. I'm gonna forego the value study for just while I'm doing that and zoom in a bit better so you can see these figures a little bit better while I'm working on them. That's okay. This guy's got that deeper shirt on. That's gonna just frame in the other side of her jacket, which is also gonna be part of this middle value in a second. Want to get some of these shadows from the kids' feet and stuff coming around here too. Into that shape. But I mean, when you're looking at these things from a distance, that's, you want it to read well from farther away. Than, I mean, I can't tell you how many times people have come in and looked at one of my paintings and then they get up close to it and they just laugh and shake their heads and they're like, I can't believe I saw a cow. And I get up close, I'm like, you didn't paint a cow. It's just like a couple little black and white spots with a couple of skinny legs, but they see a cow out of all of that. You've got to, kind of trust in the fact that you don't have to paint everything. It's amazing how much the viewer's eye fills in the gaps. I want to get the shadow side of her mustardy jacket in here into this shadow shape, just like on the value study. Shadow side of this kid's pants. And also like that. shadow side under on her blue jeans underneath. So yeah, this is the tricky part, is trying to make some of these connections out of all of this and try to keep it nice and fresh. You know, some of the figures are just standing there, but some of them are actually walking across the scene. So I try and make sure that they're a little bit unfinished, you know, their legs and things when you get to that point. But I try and continually kind of come back to a bead where I left off.
They have a lot of life already, Andy.
Oh, that's good. Thank you.
That's my aunt.
And some neutral tint maybe in a spot or two. Keep changing the color up, making sure I'm merging all the time. Framing the light side of that kid's jacket with that. A little bit darker there. I know I'm getting a little bit dark in some areas already, but that's fine. Again, if I can keep things a little bit loose at this stage, it'd be a good thing. So figures in a painting are awfully difficult, right? Everybody's experienced that. I freak out sometimes about it too. It's not an easy thing to do. But again, just I can't stress that enough, how much the viewer's brain just kind of fills in the gaps. Once you've got enough information that they see a few important figures, it's amazing what you can get away with. Just indicating some of these small little shapes and then backing off and again, you're looking at it zoomed in quite a bit. But most often, you know, the viewers are looking at your painting from several feet away or even across the room. They don't see all the little stuff. They're gonna notice the the big overall shapes. And the more you try and make every little figure perfect, the worse it gets. It's just amazing how overworked things can get if you're not careful. That kid's hoodie. And I can do a lot more filling in there. I'm probably putzing away a little bit too much for this stage of the game right now, but it is important that your figures are incorporated into all this, so easy to isolate them. Okay, I'm gonna go back to that little shadow area up above here and see if I can come in just a little bit further here. That edge a bit, and I want to spotlight her blonde hair a bit better, like so, and carry that down to the side of this woman's hair also. Possible just so that those blondes are popping out a little bit better. And then again, just like I did before, I want to soften that shadow shape a little bit better than that. Okay, there's a shadow area on her shirt as well. And I can start getting her legs in. Even though she's got darker pants, we can come back in and darken them up even more later. But I want to get that sweep of the step in pretty soon here because that's kind of gonna go right through their legs in some spots. So if I can keep it simple. And again, I took that figure out so I can paint right through that figure. She's going to be darker later anyways, and most of these guys too, so. And then it comes down just a little bit there, straightens out on the corner and goes that direction. I've got that step in. Not too worried about doing I know there's two steps, but I can put another small one in, I guess, but okay, so I've got my steps on here, right through the figures, those darker figures' legs there. I'm going to put that shadow color coming across the bottom and just kind of let that connect to that also. kind of a violet-y color in the corner. Let that all be in shadow, maybe another shadow coming in up here from another figure. But just like I did on the value study again, making those shadows, taking some artistic license and just bringing those shadows in a little bit more down here to kind of fill in that lower area. That's a bit dark. A shadow from a tree or something, it doesn't matter. It's just a shadow coming across the bottom of the paper. Some detail into it, soften it up a little bit. Okay, good enough. All right, back to these figures over here. I need to make sure she's incorporated a little bit better. Shadow side of her face and hair right into her jacket. And she's got some kind of like maroonish leggings on or something here. She's a little knock-kneed in that photograph. Okay, so she's there, and then we've got the figure looking down in the phone. I'm gonna get the shadow side on that figure. So what's this? Just gonna kind of like a little bit more with some of these other shadows here. Let that come right over here. Shadow side of her beanie. Shadow side of her face looking down. Pretty much all in shadow. Got kind of a bluish, navy blue jacket on. And I'm going to go a little bit darker with her jacket later, but the light side of it is going to have a bit of a highlight on it. So I'm going to put that in now. And then again, try and paint around her hands holding her cell phone. Like so. So yeah, it's going to be a little bit darker in some spots later on that figure, but for now, got that in. And her shadow onto the ground plane also. Always connect the figures down with their shadows right away. Same thing with this gal. Just got a foot on the step. Okay. I think that's almost everything. I want to pull it back a bit again and compare it to the value study other than some of the stuff up above in the tree line. But that's all the information down below, I think, that I had on my value study. Maybe a little bit more on whoops, old macro, the architecture of the stairwell there. Need a little bit more information on here. I don't want to get too carried away with it, but it needs some of this kind of stuff just indicated in. That's also going to help to kind of pop out the light side of her beanie too. It needed a value back there of some of that stuff. Just indicating some, I don't want to get too carried away with all that noise. It's not necessary. All right, so that's there. Now I'll just do a little bit of dry brushing with this stuff that's left on my palette here.
Stuff.
Stuff, technical term.
Stuff. Oh,
I'm gonna do some, I want to start off kind of framing in this area first though with those lower that lower bunch of trees, and then I'll go up and do a bit more dry brushing after that, but that's a little too dark. It's too similar to the stuff down below. I want this to sit back, be a little cooler and a little lighter. I like the little highlight on this figure here too, so I'm going to try and preserve that when I do this. And now I'm going to start dry brushing it up, make it look like trees. Can come in and frame in that little flag a bit better. I want this to also kind of frame in the light on there a bit better. Just some dry brush. Keep getting a weird color on my brush for some reason. Probably because my palette's a mess. Treetops, let it go. I want this tree to go right. I don't like on the photograph how it kind of ends right at the top. So I'm just going to make it a little taller and let it go right up and off the page. You don't want those tall shapes to end right at the side of your composition. Just gonna lengthen that up some and then let it curve down this way. I'm just scumbling the side of that synthetic brush over my paper here lightly, just brushing it on. Basically, you're just putting a little pigment on you're using that, that cold press or rough texture of the paper. If I press too hard with too soft of a brush and too much water, I'm just gonna fill it all in. So you're basically dry brushing, you're just trying to get a little pigment on the bumps of the paper, I guess. I can scratch out some lighter branches too, right out of it with my fingernail if I want. Continue over here. I don't want to fill it in too much. I can do all the branch work and stuff later. I want to give you all a break in just a minute here so you can stretch your legs and get fill your wine glasses and all that good stuff. Variety back there. Okay, so that is, I know that's a lot, but that's kind of following my plan of attack from the value study. All the big shapes, the same shapes are there on here, okay? But again, to think that I would just take that photograph and be able to do that in a matter of what, a little over an hour and get this far on a painting without doing this first, simplifying, clarifying in my mind's eye what I want to accomplish, keep it big. I mean, yes, I'm not saying details aren't important. They definitely are. Those darks are gonna hopefully, add to the painting and not kill it. That happens sometimes, and it's very annoying, when you get that nice big shape and then you just suck the life out of it with the darks and details, after another hour of picking away at it. So I'm going to try to inform, but that's another reason to do the value study. Practice, make sure you're, putting in the important darks, not every dark just because it was in the reference photograph, figuring out the important ones and put those into your painting. So we'll pause here for a little bit, let you take how long of a break do you want?
5 minutes, 10 minutes?
Okay, we'll cut the difference.
Will you, just incidentally, will you paint any of those arches just above the people's heads?
Oh yeah, but they're dark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are very important. I'll put those in with the darks later. Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
We're a quiet group. Except for my cat. You hear my cat? Meow. Character.
Are some of you painting during this demo, Carol?
No, you know what I'm doing?
You're
I'm
just
sorting
taking notes.
photographs. Sorting photographs.
Mm.
Trying to get ready to move. Lot to do.
Yeah, well, that's wonderful that it sold so quickly.
Yes, that is wonderful.
Do you know where you're going, Carol?
Yeah, bought a condominium in 1088 Delaware Avenue.
Oh, okay. Nice.
A 2-bedroom. I'm going from a big space to a little tiny space,
Mhm.
which is good for me. Good lesson. You're never too old to learn a lesson, I guess.
Never.
I really wasn't ready for this lesson, though.
No,
Mhm.
I'm not sure you could ever be ready.
No.
Or maybe you can. Maybe some people could. I don't know.
Can you hear my cat?
No.
Mm-mm.
Yes, I heard. I heard Diego.
It's Diego, the character. He's very unhappy about something. Probably because I'm not downstairs with him on my lap and with ice cream.
Ice cream.
Ah,
Of course.
He doesn't usually make a lot of noise like that. He's really pissed off. Oh, I've gotten through all of my photographs that were in a box. These are all photographs for paintings.
Ooh,
wow.
nice.
No, not nice. Just Carol, can't you make up your mind? But still sort of fun to go back through them. There's a lot of photographs of trips and stuff. Family.
Is that a long enough break?
That's
Yep.
perfect.
Yep.
Yeah, we're bored.
Okay.
I'm gonna
Back to the value study. Whoops. I'll set
There
this
we go.
aside for the moment. Okay. Now it's time to kind of work through and practice painting some of these dark shapes. Well, I've got my game plan.
I'd forgotten that part of your process.
Yeah, just going back and forth between the two. I didn't always used to do that, but like I showed you with that other image, it's amazing how, when you put the darks on sometimes it's just, wow, where did my middle value shape go again? So yeah, I try and keep it there. It's just too important.
Can you just explain again what you're doing to our group?
So now I'm going to find the dark shapes on my value study. I've got my color painting side by side here. Those two shapes, my middle values are very similar now between the two. Okay. I was following this game plan, just changing the color on my brush, but I was still trying to find connections and lost edges, even though it wasn't a terribly colorful scene. Like I said, this kind of, springtime, a lot of kind of dirty browns and grays and blues and stuff. But until I got down to the figures, and that's when I started trying to incorporate them too. But the same kind of thing. I was just painting around some of the highlights, making sure the shadow sides of my figures are incorporated in all this, the shadows on the ground, painting right through these figures, connecting them, painting, showing the highlight on her, showing the highlight on him. Okay. So yeah, just same approach on the value study as much as I can. I mean, obviously I took a lot more care on this one. It's the final painting, but I don't want to just abandon all the work that I did from the value study to try and find, large, simple shapes and connections. That's what it's all about. Because that's what reads well from across the room, that big anchoring shape. Okay. The details are going to add, accent the painting quite a bit, of course, but oops. Okay. So dive in here and I'll start with some of the larger dark shapes, which include the arches, of course. I want to make sure this is all reading a bit better now. I'm going to bring that down, maybe paint around a little highlighted guy's head there. That's going to incorporate this guy's hair a bit more. So now I'm leaving the middle value of all that area behind and carving that out by painting the darks around it. Okay, so that really kind of pops those two figures in particular, obviously, quite a bit. And now this guy's dark jacket, like I said, can kind of come down into it. A bit of his shirt there, paint around the shadow side of his wife's torso there. So if she comes back, even though they were connected earlier, now I'm getting her back right down to the bottom there. She's got a darker shirt in there, sunglasses, a darker handbag or purse here. Okay, so she's back, the other dark archway back here, get the other side of that column in, right down to the tops of my dirty rotten teenagers again. Get them back. And coming down in between them a little bit, and some of them have darker clothes and shadows and things on there, maybe darker pants or something, whatever it might be. Darker ball cap on that kid, maybe pop out the highlight on her shoulder a bit better with a dark there. A few darker jackets and things in the background here. Paint behind that kid's sweatshirt a little bit better with that dark shape. Give him some darker pants also. Okay. I mean, a lot more life, right? Just coming in,
Yes.
but they were all included in the earlier stages. Now I'm making a few more separations again. Okay. Those are in there. Maybe darken up her pants a bit better here. And then her jacket was a little bit darker as well. That sleeve coming down on top of her pants. And then this main figure here, again, I can leave some of the middle value from that earlier shape behind on her shoulder and stuff, but kind of frame her in a little bit better again, show that her hand's better on the phone. Leave that middle value of her jacket behind. There's her striding foot. Okay, so she's there. Darken up that guy's face a bit. And this kid has some darker hair, darker backpack and sweatshirt, darker tennis shoes. She's got a little darker shape on her jacket, a bit more. So they're popping up better. Okay. I already went a little bit darker on this thing before, but I'm gonna darken this up just a little bit here on the value study. I've already done some of that on my color painting, I think. Didn't really need to, but I wanted to get it a little bit softer there. I'm trying to bring this forward a little bit more from the background. That little bowl shape there. Bring all this architecture forward. Darken a little darker jacket on this figure up above. You're seeing her through the gap there. Maybe just very subtly get some architectural lines on here too. And again, some of this, I'm not sure how much of this I want to do. So by putting it in on the value study, oftentimes I'll put this stuff in. It's like, ugh, that was too much. I didn't need to do that. Well, great. I didn't ruin my painting. So this is your warm up. This is for practice, working through some of these issues. Make sure you're putting in what you want, not overdoing it. I'm going to do just a couple little things on the stairwell just to show the steps just a little bit better here. A couple of spots, again, I don't want to get too carried away with that either. Didn't do all those little things on here before. Same thing over here. A few steps. Okay. The big tree trunks now. I want to darken this up as well, just like I did on the other side. A bit more. Bring that forward from the background a little better. Okay. Tree trunks now and branches. Make sure I'm getting all that in. Right down to the top of the stairs. And I don't have to do, I don't need to get too carried away with all this on the value study, but again, it's good to practice. Gonna figure out where I want to place that tree trunk so it's not too obviously. I wanted it to kind of maybe frame that in a little bit. Side of that thing. Okay. I don't think it needs too much more than that. I'll leave it at that, I think. So again, kind of a big jump from the reference photograph and simplification, but a big jump from the middle value shape that I put on there before. There's a lot more detail in here now. It reads a lot better. It has depth. I don't want to put darks way back in that distant area with the skyscrapers and the trees. I want that to sit back. So when I'm putting my darks in, it's the area right around the steps and forward, so that visually all that comes forward in the viewer's mind. Maybe just a little bit of architecture there. Okay. So there's the darks on there. Go in, I've practiced it. Seems to be working okay. So onto the value study, or onto the color painting now and try and do some of the same things. Starting with my arches again. Some of the architecture, pop those figures out. Make sure it comes right down to that guy's head. Kind of joins in with him. And it's going to help to pop her out even more. Her hair. Surrounding her just a little bit, like so. Okay, I want that to continue right down kind of into his jacket, just like on the value study. Get a little bit of a dark or a lighter shirt up above showing through the gap, but now the shadow side, or now his jacket will help to show the other side of his wife by kind of carving that shape out. They were just overlapping before. All right, so they pop out quite a bit more now. The other arch. Trying to get a little warmth in that area. Some burnt sienna and stuff in there. I can also. And again, that's going to come right down and start framing in a little gaggle of teenagers. Paint around the white ball cap one more time. Try and make sure that that's popping out. That kid really pops out better now as well. And I can come right down in with some darker blues and things in a minute to frame all of them in better. Darker shirt back here in the background, maybe. All right, some darker blues. Right behind this lady again, so that I can kind of trying to pop out the star in my show a bit more. The stars, the closer figures, so that they're okay. That's fine. Her shirt underneath there was a little bit darker, I think, and her handbag underneath there again. Okay, all the same stuff that I did before. It's still important to practice it. All right, a few darker shirts and things back here also. Try and keep it simple. This is danger zone. Don't overwork. Don't suck the life out of all that work you did to simplify, and then, oh my goodness, especially with people, it can become such an eyesore if you overdo it.
Eyesore.
Honestly, it's too much.
Right.
They
That's
draw
great.
they draw so much attention already, that if you spend an inordinate amount of time on them, they just become, too much.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's so important to simplify things down as much as you can when it comes to them. Okay, I want a little bit of some architectural detail on here, just like I did before, maybe just with some dry brushing and stuff. I want to go a little bit darker in a couple areas. Okay, same thing on those arches. I want to get this little bowl shape, a little darker shadow on it so it comes forward from my trees. And just a little detail on there also. Just a few important darks, that's all. I don't want to get too carried away with it. And this needed to be a little darker again as well. Some details, a few things. Just use my finger to soften edges or, especially in these shadow areas. I don't want them to be too descriptive. I want all the detail in the shadows to be a little murky. So I painted, obviously everything's dry now, so no matter what I paint is a little bit hard edged and harsh. So I try and come back in and just smudge it or smear it with my finger once in a while. All right, that's on there. Some neutral tint or something on one of these kids back here. All right. Let me do a couple little quick things on my steps there again, just to show a bit of detail on them. Don't get too carried away, but they need to look a little bit more like steps. Same thing I did on my value study. I'll do a couple, leave a gap. A couple again. Right, I've got some stairs back now. Darken up my closer figures. This gal's jacket, she's got more of a dark shadow side. Paint around her blonde hair one more time. That sleeve is darker. Sunlight on that edge. Darken up the top of her kind of burgundy leggings into the shadow area. Bit. Her friend has some darker pants on. Get those in now. So again, I didn't paint around any of these areas. I painted right through them, even though now I'm going to be darkening them up, but don't paint around things that are darker. Paint right through them. Okay, now on to my cell phone figure, that largest figure. It's got kind of a navy blue coat on. I'm going to go a bit darker on the shadow side here. Maybe leave a little bit of light in the gap there. I'm gonna frame in the cell phone hands a little better. Be a little too light. Right. Checking her urgent messages. Darken up her shadow side of the beanie just a bit. All right, I'm going to darken up on the steps just to give them right when it comes around this little bend here. I'm just kind of soften it into the shadow area like that, but let's give that a little bit more form too. All right, same things I saw in my value study, all the same stuff, the steps. I want to darken up this little corner here like I did on there before. That's back. A little figure standing underneath there, that gal. She's got a darker side to her hair and her shirt or her jacket also. It's a bit darker. And just maybe a little bit on her blue jeans, not too much. Right, the guy striding towards her. Darken his hair a little bit. His shirt. Underneath his arm. Got a backpack on. Let's change the color of the backpack a little bit. His skin is a little too pale. I want to give him a shadow side on his face here and under his arm. All right, so he's walking into the scene. Backing up his jersey a little bit and his tennis shoe there. A bit of a darker shadow behind her. Okay, this other little bowl up here needs to be a little darker. Bring that forward from the background, just like the other one. Trying to create some depth. As soon as I put these areas on visually, those shapes come forward in the viewer's mind. So again, that just reinforces, don't go too dark with things in the background. You don't want to suck the viewer's eye way back there. Create that sense of depth by just leaving it as is. And that's a little plain and boring, so I need to get a little bit of stuff on here to break it up just a little.
Andy, we just got a question asking about what brand of paint you use.
It's mostly Winsor & Newton. That's just kind of what I started with. But I've got some Holbein in there. I use Daniel Smith paints once in a while in my palette in the studio at home. Yeah, there's a lot of good ones, but primarily I use Winsor & Newton just because that's what I learned with. I got comfortable with it. I know how they react on the paper, and there's enough things that can go wrong in watercolor without changing your materials too often, too much. So I try and just stick with what I know. All righty. Tree trunks. All righty. Let's see. That's gonna pop this out nicely. Good shape there, right down to the top of the stairs. And that'll help pop out that little light here also. I don't think I need two of them actually. Get rid of one of them. This branch coming out that direction. Some little spindly, windy branches and stuff here. Those tree trunks are kind of important too. They're just kind of the finishing touch. They add some nice depth to the scene also. I'll make sure my branches are going out to those little dry brush tufts that I put in there before. Needs to make sense. on either side of that. These are all just little fun things at the end of the painting. I don't know how much time you want me to take on all this, but I'm not going to put in too many of these branches, but you get the idea. All right, we've got another one back here. And then this one I moved over a bit, so it would help to frame this in better. Like I said, it's gonna be a dangerous time. I mean, obviously, like I said, these trees are fairly important. I like what they do to the scene, but got to be careful. How carried away I get with things. Goodness. A couple little darker people up there by the railing too. I need to give her a darker jacket and let you see her through that little hole in the architecture. And same thing with the other figure here. A bit darker on the shadow side of them. And you're going to see the rest of that figure kind of through the gap here. Also standing there. Ugh. Whoops, I gotta get this little line in too. Coming down like so.
Don't want to
Well,
interrupt you too much, but it is,
what's that?
it's 9:16.
Oh, okay. Yep, that's plenty. Thank you.
I think
I
it's
think that's
especially wonderful because what I'm surprised at is I didn't see you saving those little bits and pieces of white when you were doing the middle level of color.
yeah, down
But
in
boy,
here,
they
the
sure
trees.
show up when you put the darks in, don't they?
Yeah, exactly. Everything pops out a lot more at that stage. Yeah, that's what it's all about, making things pop.
What would you say the subject matter is of this?
I mean, I get asked that a lot, what's your focal point? I mean, the main
No, that's
figure
not
is
what I
going to be,
asked.
yeah, the subject matter is
Yeah,
just kind of that whole, people just enjoying a nice
yeah.
spring day by
Okay.
Bethesda Fountain. So,
Yeah.
yeah, you have some little bit more areas of interest, obviously, but all the, these figures are a little more prominent. This figure, of course, is more prominent. and this guy walking in the scene and stuff. But yeah, I think just overall,
I think it's
uh,
very nice. Very
thank
nice
you.
indeed.
I
Thanks.
love your figures.
Yeah.
I have a
great.
question about plein air. So
Okay.
would you do this out plein air as well?
I don't think so. No,
Okay.
or I would eliminate a lot more of the figures. If I was doing this plein air, probably.
Okay.
Yeah, there's some scenes that are just a bit much for plein air. You got to choose your battles wisely. Um, and yeah, this would be a little frustrating for me, I think, plein air, everybody
Okay.
moving around. So yeah, I mean, I painted a lot of times in Central Park, plein air. I've been
Mhm.
doing it a bit, but I tend to go to one of these little side bridges or something where there might just be a few people, and yeah, the chaos of all of. But plus, I like to, invariably you set up your easel and people are going to come and want to watch and talk and everything and see what you're doing. And so I try to find
Right.
some place that's a little bit off the beaten path if I can, so that there's, try and redo. I don't mind talking to people when I'm out there. Actually, it's fun sometimes. But yeah, a place like this, it's going to be quite a bit. So.
Yeah. Did you do the value study as well, or you just go for it?
Oftentimes what I'll do plein air is just that first, I won't finish it with the darks because the darks are usually pretty obvious.
Right.
But depending on the scene, I might come in and do a middle value plein air just to simplify things down. But there's a lot of landscapes that I do where it's pretty straightforward. When I'm just looking at it, I can see the values. So I don't really, plus, I mean, your time frame outside is a lot more limited. So,
Right.
yeah, there's times where I'll just dive right into the painting because I'm worried about losing the light or something. So
Yeah.
Well, it's
Very
terrific.
nice.
If you
It's
could,
beautiful.
thank
Beautiful
you.
work.
Beautiful.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me. I hope everybody enjoys the rest of their winter.
well, can you email me a photograph of the painting?
Sure. Yep. I'll wait till tomorrow and I'll photograph it in some nice light and email it to you. Sure.
Okay. Well, I'm about
Thank you,
to.
Andy.
Beautiful.
Thank you so much. It's